Good morning, everybody. David McCoy, Ochimo Properties, Real Estate Matters. We've been doing a little bit of a series on questions or topics that investors might ask. And today I thought we'd do one. This is a lesser known one. And so we're just going to kind of touch on the highlights of that, and that is buying notes. So you may recall several years ago when we had our economic meltdown, what was happening there is people were buying up the bad mortgages and bundling them together and then selling them as a investment instrument. You know, in essence, it was like an investment fund of those mortgages. And what the banks were doing that to get rid of these bad mortgages that they were having a hard time getting, taken care of. And because they were government-backed mortgages, even though they were really, technically in default, they were still able to pass them off as high-grade, low-risk investments because the government supposedly would be able to back those loans. And so, the rest of the story, what ultimately happened, they didn't have enough money to cover all those, and those loans were all going bad, and they weren't really paying attention to that. They were, because the government said they would guarantee the loans, the banks and the other financial institutions continued to make loans even in situations they should not, because they felt like they could just get rid of them if they didn't want to. Well, the way that played out, I mean, it was, it was just sort of a disaster waiting to happen. But what they were doing really, I mean, there was nothing wrong with that. Other than you should be having the risk and the reward, should be matching up. You shouldn't be making loans might go bad just because you can pass them off somewhere. And so we've had all these reforms since then. Things have changed tremendously. But the idea of buying loans and reselling them, that happens all the time. That is still happening. That has not changed. A lot of mortgage companies and banks and financial institutions, they will do the mortgages, and they start it, but then once they have done the mortgage, then they sell that to other people, to other investors. It may be in a fund, or it could be a number of different ways. And so that still happens. We do that all the time. The idea of selling the bad loans also still happens. You don't always have, the banks they don't always really want to be, going and foreclosing and doing all these things. They may just want out. And so the banks and financial institutions will sell their non-performing loans. That's very common. Now, it used to be that basically that was only available to institutional investors. And I would say that institutional investors do the majority of those. But I don't know when, but a while ago, 10 or 15 years ago, or I don't know when, there were some people who said, hey, can we do this, and then we'll split it up among individual investors. And so they did, we won't go into great detail about the history of that, but they gave it a shot, and it worked out pretty well. And so now that seems to be more common. They will do that. So there will be people who are sort of like, they're kind of like brokers, and they will buy a number of these mortgages, and then they will resell them. So what does that do for us? I mean, what does that do for individuals? Well, it's possible, if you get a broker who can help you do that, and you can buy these notes. And, so you may, the question of course is, well, why would I want to buy a note on non-performing loans? Well, you want to buy it because you might be able to buy that at 10 or 20% of the value of that note. So, for the sake of our argument here, let's say there's a $100,000 mortgage and it is in default, and the bank is trying to figure out what to do, and they decide just to sell the mortgage because it's non-performing. The people aren't paying on it, and so it's just on their books, and they would rather get rid of it and not have that bad debt on their books. So so they sell it, but it's a $100,000 loan, and maybe they sell it to you for $10,000 or $20,000. I think that value is, I think it's done sort of like an auction. So so I don't know exactly what you might pay for that, but it would be, a lot less than the face value. Well, you still have a non-performing loan. But what you can then do, so there was a gentleman who I talked with who does this a few years back, and so he buys up the notes at 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, and so he has a $100,000 note, and he has but he has 10,000 or 20,000 in it. Well, he calls the homeowners, and what he generally does is he sits down with them and he says, okay, I'm the new owner of your mortgage. Let's sit down and figure out a way that we can, reconfigure this loan so that you can pay it. So he will sit down with them and he will negotiate a lower payment for that loan, and they'll adjust the terms accordingly so that he gets paid. Maybe they extend the time, or they change the interest rate, or something along those lines. But he, in essence, renegotiates all the payments for them and lowers their payments so that hopefully they can then make their payments. And if they are making their payments, it's sort of a win-win for everybody because they don't lose their house. They're able to get it to somewhere where they can afford it. He doesn't care. Of course, he's not telling them, which there's no reason that they need to know that. But he doesn't have $100,000 in it. He has $10,000 or $20,000 in it. So the interest rate he's getting is super high. It's super high. And he is, but he has lowered their rate. He's made it so they can stay in there. He's making, a good deal of money on it. It's one of those win-win kind of situations. There are some dangers. Of course, there's the possibility that they can't do it under any circumstances. And this gentleman said generally, again, 10 to 20% of the time, he has to go ahead and foreclose. He prefers not to do that. He tries to get up there so 90% of the time or so they can stay. And if he can do that, that's the way they do it. But sometimes they just can't do it. Sometimes they can't. But, that's one of those things that I think is a great thing, to do. You can do it that way. There are other dangers as well. If they are behind on their payments, there might also be problems with their other debts. There could be other liens against the house. There could be a lot of damage to the house because it's possible that they haven't been able to maintain it, or some people. Some people, they start getting worried or desperate or doing things like that, and they start, tearing things up. Sometimes they're trying to sell it. Like I've heard of situations where people have torn out new cabinets out of a house they were renting so they could sell the cabinets. You know, it's kind of crazy, but people do that. Sometimes people do that because they're not good people. Sometimes people do that because they're basically good people, but they're just desperate. So, so you can have other things you have to other risk there that you have to be aware of. And I think that when you sit down with the owners, you have to kind of make sure that that's all figured out. That, you know, that you're not going to have somebody else come in and foreclose on the house because some other debts aren't paid. But if there is a foreclosure, because it's mortgage debt, there's sort of a hierarchy of the way those debts are paid. If there's a foreclosure, I think at the very top of the list are the federal tax liens. Then I think the next, and you will have to check me on this because I'm doing this from memory and I don't remember exactly, but as I recall, the very top of the list is federal tax liens. The second thing are property tax liens. The third is the mortgage debt. And then the fourth would be any mechanics liens or other liens like that. So, you know, you're in a good position. Once the taxes are paid and everything else, you would be the first person in line to be able to get paid from the proceeds if you had to foreclose. Now, finding these things, there's some people who do it, and I would have to go back and try to find the name of the person I talked with because it's been quite a while since he and I spoke. But that is one thing you can do, and it's kind of in a way, it's kind of a cool and creative thing. It's a way that you can make, you know, a very high return, and it's secured by a mortgage, and at the same time possibly really help out somebody who maybe has been struggling, and, you know, possibly you can get it to where they can stay in their home and do well. So that's really it for today. I just thought that was a cool thing. Thought I might mention it. You know, you might be able to, I don't know if you can find that online or not, but I can probably look it up. I can probably figure it out. But that's one other way that people will invest in real estate. All right, that's going to be it for today. I hope that if you found this to be helpful, that you will click like. And if you know someone else who might benefit from this, please share it with them. And if you want to see more of these, I hope that you will subscribe. And we're having a rainy day here today, and it's kind of, but I'm going out here in a little bit. I'm going to go look at property. It's always a good time to look at property in the rain. I think I did another video on that. So anyway, I won't redo that one. But I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.